games. They exist in both the real world and in many fictional worlds. And when reading the Yu-Gi-Oh! Manga back in 2002, 2003, and 2004, I learned the true meaning of the word gaming, as Yu-Gi-Oh! Was the anime/manga that kicked off the gambling anime/gambling manga subgenre. A metagame, i.e. a fictional game, is a game that exists within a fictional show or a movie. A good example of that would be Duel Monsters. And in this video, I am going to be giving you my top 10 list of metagames that I wish were real. And just for the record, there are no limitations. I can put any game I want on this list as long as it comes from a fictional show or a movie. And now, with that said, let's start the top 10 list. Okay, the number 10 spot on this list is essentially a tie between two different metagames from two different shows that were produced by Nickelodeon. And those two games are Zombie Dice from Are You Afraid of the Dark? Now, the reason that this one is so low on the list is because of the stakes. When you play Zombie Dice, you apparently wager your thumbprint, and whoever has the zombie dice, in the episode, the guy who ran the arcade basically was using the zombie dice to enslave people, shrink them, and sell them as pets. That's the reason that this game is so low on the list. Like he said in the episode, if you have someone's fingerprints, you own them, and he was selling everyone he beat at this game as essentially a human pet. And that's why this is so low on the list. And the metagame that Zombie Dice is tied with is the King Rules from Hey Arnold. I know that this is a parody of Magic the Gathering, and essentially more or less fantasy poker, or poker with a fantasy theme. But I always thought, ever since I saw the episode Gerald's Game, that the idea of a secret society that's based around this one game would actually be really cool in real life and potentially very fun and profitable. The only reason it's tied with zombie dice is because if you lose everything, you would end up as a dungeon pawn and would have to spend the next 6 months of your life basically serving whoever runs the secret society. And it was the dungeon pawn factor that essentially is the reason as to why it's tied with zombie dice at number 10. Nobody Beats the Hammer from Regular Show. Now, personally, I don't play video games, but if this were real, I would definitely be willing to make an exception and fight my way to the final level. My reason for doing so, if this game were real, would be to bring the hammer into our world so I could take him on in a one-on-one fist fight. I mean, I might have to use furniture to win, but it'd be the fight of the goddamn century. It'd be all over the news. And it would be the kind of thing where I might need an announcer like in the World Tournament on Dragon Ball, but it would definitely be worth it. If this game were real, I would not pass up the opportunity to get into a fist fight with the hammer. This may make me sound like Vegeta from the Semi-Perfect Cell Saga, but I'm a real man. I'm the kind of man who's always itching for a fight. And every potential opponent around me is basically too much of a pussy to essentially even try and duke it out with me. And if you have a problem with that, you can go fuck yourself, you dumbass bitch and or beta male pussy. Okay, the number 8 spot on this list is going to be a 3-way tie between 3 different metagames that were not only made by 3 different companies, but exist entirely within 3 different mediums. The first is the unnamed military-styled chess game played between the general and an unnamed soldier from the episode of Courage the Cowardly Dog, Courage the Fly. I chose this one for this exact feature. Not only do the wind-up pieces, not only are they able to attack the players, but the players are also allowed to smash opposing game pieces. I mean, in all fairness, that would be a really neat novelty for a game in the real world, all Cartoon Network would have to do is give it a name, give it rules, and make sure it plays out exactly like the scene from Courage the Fly. I mean, yeah, I know it'd be dangerous, and you'd have to be at least 21 to buy a copy of it, but I would buy a copy of it. Not to mention the fact that it would be interesting to see what other game pieces that whoever Cartoon Network hires to make this would add into the game, because what's on screen here would not be enough. And I actually would be interested in seeing what the company hired to publish this game and or develop it would add. I mean, because eventually this novel board game would get an expansion pack. I can only imagine what they would throw in and how they'd be able to inflict damage onto the opposing players. And this game is tied in the number 8 slot with 3 deadly challenges from the recent SpongeBob episode, Bubble Bass's Tab. I mean, I could really see Nickelodeon cutting a deal with Hasbro or Parker Brothers to make this into an actual board game. And I know that the episode does center around SpongeBob and Squidward having to defeat Bubble Bass in a life-size replica of the game that he made and put in his mother's basement. But in all fairness, and a game company could probably create rules for the Storm the Castle challenge, the Matador challenge, and the Joust challenge that would probably involve rolling dice or flipping coins. But hey, this is the kind of board game that I could see working out in the real world. Or in this case, work out well being brought into the real world by Nickelodeon and whatever board game company that they're willing to strike up a contract with. 3 deadly challenges and the unnamed military board game are tied at the number 8 spot with Circle Chess from Monkey Magic Episode 3. I mean, it looks fun enough, and the rules are simple. All you gotta do is make it to the center to win. Also, it doubles as a really unique hypnotic wheel, which could end up being a really good for party tricks. Inverted Paradox, The Enemy Within. I really gotta say, if this bootleg was real, I would definitely buy it. And yes, I am very well aware that this is a parody of Final Fantasy VII. But either way, I'd be more than willing to fight my way through everyone who would have bought cursed items from whoever sold me a copy, well, sold me the Game Child. It is a good thing that I do have enough willpower to avoid the find this guy's random pigeon side quest thing and just continue grinding and unlocking new abilities. And you better believe that if this bootleg ever existed, I would use it to live out one of my fantasies, since both Final Fantasy and Dragon Warrior had a lot of artwork for both franchises done by Akira Toriyama. You better believe that while I'm grinding and developing my skills, I'm gonna go full Dragon Ball. And by that, I mean full Son Goku. My main three special attacks would be the Kamehameha, along with any and all variations of it. Kaioken, levels 1 through 20, and the Spirit Bomb, all three versions, normal, super, and universal sized / level. And outside the main three, I would also have all of the other abilities that Goku used throughout the series. All 4 of them. And once I talked to whoever I got the game from, my allies and I would use our Dragon Ball Z type special attacks to defeat the evil Game Child in an epic battle. One worthy to be, one great enough to be viewed by an audience that would be the size of the audience of the World Tournament from Dragon Ball Z. And throughout both the adventure and the climactic final fight, my allies and I would essentially be like the Z fighters of that universe, and Kenji from Battle Realms would be our equivalent to Master Roshi. The Forever Game from Are You Afraid of the Dark? I mean, the Forever Game is something that could really work in a meta aspect. Like Zombie Dice, this only appeared in one episode as Are You Afraid of the Dark isn't exactly something that has actual continuity. But, I mean, in all fairness, I really do like the game. It has a space that shoots lightning, a space that summons a monster from the middle of the woods, but that's part of the story. And if this game were real, I would want to play it because of the mystery aspect to it. For all the things on the board, or in this case, all the spaces on the board that we didn't see in the episode Tale of the Forever Game. Now, in doing research for this video, this was originally supposed to be tied with both Jumanji and Zathura for the exact same reasons, but they actually have... Well, Jumanji and Zathura both have board games based off of them, so this, as far as I can tell, is the only one out of the three that wasn't adapted into a real board game in the real world, which is a shame, because like Jumanji and Zathura, there were spaces in which we never saw what was written on them, and cards that we never saw in Zathura's case, that we don't know what was on them. And it's the whole mystery aspect. Playing it just to see what I'd play it just to see what I would encounter, for curiosity's sake, and that's why it was originally tied with Jumanji and Zathura, but now the Forever Game from Are You Afraid of the Dark sits alone at number 6. The Realm of Darthon from the regular show episode, But I Have the Receipt. This is on the list for the same reason that Inverted Paradox, The Enemy Within, was on the list. I mean, just imagine how fun a role-playing game would be if you could actually make the story real, and you'd actually be killing monsters instead of rolling dice. You'd be able to have your own class, summon allies to fight alongside you as your party, and best of all, you can essentially change your class, change your party, change your equipment, essentially warp reality so that what the campaign truly boils down to is he who has the greatest imagination shall be the last one standing. Capsule Monster Chess. And yes, I am fully aware that Konami tried to bring this game to life. But if this game were real, I would want it to be just like it is in the manga. With figures that would be in plastic capsule eggs, a bunch of different boards. This would be a version of Capsule Monsters where, yes, you would be able to acquire new capsule monsters by trading with your friends or buying them. But mainly, you would get new capsule monsters out of coin machines. Just put in a coin, turn the lever, and boom! A new instant capsule with a capsule monster inside it. Like in the manga, the boards would have both HP spaces so that a capsule monster would be able to recover HP, and evolution spaces so that a weak capsule monster would be able to evolve into a strong capsule monster. And the monsters would have both special attacks and special abilities that they would be able to use in battle. So yeah, if Konami hypothetically contacted me and wanted me to essentially bring capsule monsters to the real world, well, or in this case, make a better version of the figure game they made, this is exactly how I would do it. To Catch a Princess from Ballmasters 9009. I mean, a game where you catch women like Pokemon and either choose to release them or go so far as to make them your minions, would sell like hotcakes. I guarantee you of that. Plus, the fact that you're doing it to literal princesses would actually be a really good fuck you to both Nintendo and Disney, the two most rotten, corrupt companies that I can think of. And since this is a Pokemon parody, I can only assume that's how it would work, is that these princesses would be like Pokemon. You can either have them as your minions or release them. I can't believe Adult Swim hasn't tried to make an actual spin-off of that episode, or at the least tried to replicate this and either put it on Steam or at the very least the Adult Swim homepage. That episode of Ballmasters is the closest thing that we'd ever get to a Moemon anime, and to be frank, Adult Swim should consider actually trying to spin To Catch a Princess off into its own continuity. I guarantee you that if they did, they would A, make a lot of money, and B, would essentially create a really good Pokemon parody that would give them... they'd make a whole lot of money if they either made this into an actual computer game or decided to spin To Catch a Princess off into its own separate continuity, separate from Ballmasters 9009. If To Catch a Princess was ever made into a real game, I can only imagine that the princesses in it would interact with the player character in the same exact way that Raphtalia and Philo interact with Nelphime in The Rising of the Shield Hero. Either way, To Catch a Princess is definitely a metagame that should be made into a real one. Dungeon Dice Monsters. Now, I know that this is a real game. Konami did bring it into the real world, but hypothetically, for the sake of argument, if it was ever redesigned, I would want Konami to essentially make it, well, almost identical to the version from the anime, as opposed to this. Just because I'm going with the anime's interpretation, or at least I would if Konami wanted me to revive it, doesn't mean that I wouldn't essentially make it the way the original Japanese version was. The crests on the dice would look the same as they did in the first viewing of the anime here in America, Japanese version, and in the manga. The dice would also function the same way the Japanese versions of them do, where you're able to click them out and put a monster figure there. And if I were to have complete control over how Dungeon Dice Monsters would return, I would include the dueling arena from the anime. Players would still put their dice into the automators that would then send them to the players in groups of 3, and if possible, I would definitely throw in the holograms so that players would be able to dimension the dice. Monsters in the version of Dungeon Dice Monsters, the hypothetical one that could exist, because hypothetically Konami asks me to bring it back, would have effects from both the anime and effects from the manga. Players would have access to monsters from both the anime and manga interpretations of Dungeon Dice Monsters, as well as having access to the ever-helpful help screen that would help players devise strategies by essentially informing them of a monster's capability or what an item does. Players would also have access to items that they would only be able to summon using the black die, like the Warp Vortex and the Monster Cannon. I don't know whether or not I would be able to work Armor Wizard Pazoo into the game. I mean, I probably could, But since the Dungeon Master would not be in this version, because, we'd be playing the game using actual dueling arenas that would produce holograms and sort and automate our dice. But that doesn't mean I couldn't put him in the game, despite lack of a dungeon master, and essentially make him something that could equip onto other monsters that are controlled by the same player who summoned him. And if dungeon dice monsters were ever to come back, this is how I would want it to come back. But in all fairness, we should have gotten a version that was completely identical to the original Japanese version. If Konami ever wanted me to bring it back, I would bring it back the same exact way that the game was portrayed in the anime. Duel monsters. I mean, come on. Was there ever any doubt that this would be number one? And when I say that, I don't mean the Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game. When I say duel monsters, I more or less mean an alternate version of the game where the magic, trap, and monster effects are more or less identical to the original, to their counterparts in the original anime. If anything, this alternate version of Yu-Gi-Oh! That I speak of when I mention Duel Monsters being a real game would more or less be how I just described it. An alternate version of Yu-Gi-Oh! In which card effects are identical to their first appearances in the anime. And yes, that would require giving cards certain effects that really would make next to no sense in an actual tournament. And the cards would more or less be like the ones featured in my Yu-Gi-Oh! Dark Duel Legends series / game design. But here's how I would see this hypothetical alternate version of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game working. One, it'd probably be best to just call it Duel Monsters and not have the name Yu-Gi-Oh! Attached to any of the packs. But if Konami actually went through with this, here's how I would see it working. The rules to this alternate version of Yu-Gi-Oh! Would be identical to the rules of the game as it was played in Yugi's first duel with Kaiba. Kaiba's duel with Pegasus, and the Duelist Kingdom Finals. Essentially a combination of the way the rules were described in episode 1 and by Pegasus in episode 4. For a good example as to how this alternate version of Yu-Gi-Oh! Would be played, just check out any one of my Yu-Gi-Oh! Dark Duel Legends videos. It would work in steps, or in this case, phases. Phase 1 would obviously be to make the cards and release them. Phase 2 is, when the game is popular enough, begin holding large tournaments reminiscent of the one that Pegasus humiliated Bandit Keith at. Phase 3, build legitimate dueling arenas that would be able to create monster holograms. Phase 4 would be to then have televised championships similar to the one that Rex Raptor and Weevil Underwood dueled with, complete with trophies, prize money, and everything. Phase 5 would be to replicate Duelist Kingdom by essentially renting out an island, gathering as many high-level players as possible, and putting them on a boat and having them sail out to that island. Like on the show, the players would be given star chips, which they would wager before each duel, and build all sorts of dueling arenas all over the island that cover each and every possible terrain that could give monsters field power bonuses. For instance, a forest terrain that would power up all insect, beast, and beast warrior type monsters. A field terrain that would boost the attack and defense of warrior, beast, and beast warrior type monsters. A mountain terrain that would increase the power of dragon and winged beast type monsters. An ocean terrain that would increase the attack and defense capabilities of all aqua, fish, sea serpent, thunder, and any other monster whose attack involves thunder. Summon Skull. Wasteland terrains that would increase the power of all zombie, rock, and dinosaur-type monsters played on it. And at night, all field power bonuses would go to fiend-type monsters. There would also be 2 hidden arenas. The first would be one to power up zombie-type monsters, and the second would be a 2-on-2 arena where 2 players would be able to go up against 2 Konami employees in a labyrinth duel. And maybe we could even find a way to have an arena to simulate the prototype dual disc duel between Yugi and Kaiba. Would be a castle in the middle of the island where that arena would most likely be placed, but that's beside the point. The castle is where the finals would be held once the tournament is down to down to 8-4 players. There would be additional rules in this tournament. Outside of the field power bonus, players would be, it'd just be easier to think of it like a tabletop game, where in a scenario like the one Yugi was in episode 6, you'd actually be able to smash the moon with a monster like Giant Soldier of Stone. And while using a dragon type or a fire monster at night, you would be able to negate the effects of a card like Castle of Dark Illusions by simply attacking the darkness around the opposing monsters. But the rules would go back to normal during the tournament finals. Phase 6 would be to construct replicas of the prototype dual discs and essentially sell them to make an even greater profit. Phase 7 would be to hold a tournament exactly like Duelist Kingdom, but replace the dueling arenas with the prototype dual discs. The rules for this tournament would be exactly like the rules for the duel between Yugi and Kaiba at Duelist Kingdom. And yes, cards like Eye of Truth, Crush Card Virus, and Multiply would work in the exact same way that they worked in that duel. Same thing with Ancient Lamp. Phase 8 would be for Konami to throw essentially another Duelist Kingdom tournament. Just replace the oversized dueling arenas with the replicas of the prototype dual discs that Yugi and Kaiba used when they went up against each other in Duelist Kingdom. Phase 9 would be for Konami to replicate the dual discs from Season 2 and beyond. You know, the ones that are used in every sequel of Yu-Gi-Oh! As well as every season past Season 2, complete with holo imagers and everything. Konami would have to send a satellite up into space and have them linked with all the dual discs, but throw that in with the dual discs themselves and the holo imagers, and duels would be able to happen anywhere, even a city. For starters, all Konami would have to do, with this version of Yu-Gi-Oh! Having been so successful up to this point, would be to just go to any random city, most likely one of the largest on Earth, and tell the mayor that they want to do this. I'm pretty sure said mayor would not argue having that city transformed into Battle City for what I can only assume would be a week at tops, as this would bring in a lot of publicity. The rules would temporarily change in order to match the rules used in Battle City. And just like in Battle City, these duels would actually work with an ante, with both players wagering their rarest card before the duel, and the winner of the duel taking the loser's rarest card. And that would be great publicity, because whoever this guy is, he'd be amazing. He'd be like a real Yugi, having won all these duels, winning the rarest cards in his opponent's decks, and using them to boost his own, which will basically only make him a powerhouse in upcoming tournaments after the rules go back to normal. Phase 10 would essentially be to do Battle City 2. And you're probably wondering, how would that work? We never saw that. It was only mentioned in Yu-Gi-Oh! GX. Here's what I would do. Essentially, set up a metallic building with all sorts of tech inside it that would work with dual discs, and have a bunch of players compete in a tournament using the Deckmaster system from the virtual tournament in Season 3. The rules would be identical to the rules in the Noah Saga, where it's just like Battle City, but if you lose your Deckmaster, you lose the duel, and you can use your Deckmaster's ability. But I would throw in the twist that as players clash, they would wager their Deckmasters. And I'd even work in the dual robot / dual computer from Season 2 as more or less the means for someone who just lost a duel to, win an extra deckmaster. I'd probably have a system where they could use this, duel against the computer twice, making it a 3 losses and you're out of the tournament permanently type system. But after this iteration of Battle City 2, the rules would go back to normal permanently. Phase 11 would pretty much just be like with Duelist Kingdom, only instead you'd be replicating the GX tournament from Yu-Gi-Oh! GX. And then later in the year, have a couples tag team tournament like in Yu-Gi-Oh! GX's 4th season. Yeah, I know that one would be kinda hard because there'd be a lot of guys who'd have to nag and pressure their wives or girlfriends to build decks and duel in this tournament, but I could see it working and being good publicity. Hell, you could even have it on Valentine's Day of that year or the next year for publicity. And finally, Phase 12 is something that would literally take Konami 200 years to make a reality, and that would be 1. Make turbo dueling an actual thing so that people could battle in this version of Yu-Gi-Oh! While riding motorcycles. After that, make action dueling actually exist. And then make a legitimate replica of Link Vrains from Yu-Gi-Oh! V-Rains that people could actually link into from their dual discs from anywhere without requiring a server or anything. I know that one would probably take at least 800 years, but it would be worth it. And while they're at it, they may as well replicate rush dueling from Yu-Gi-Oh! 7s. So anyways, that is what a hypothetical alternate version of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game would look like if I was behind it. I know it's expensive as all hell, and Konami would never be able to make it work for various reasons. But if they asked me to whip up an alternate version of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game, or if I was hypothetically sent back in time and was asked by Konami to design an actual Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game for them, this is what it would look like. If you like what the hypothetical version of Yu-Gi-Oh! That I made up, please let me know in the comments below. I liked it, and I really do think that Konami should hire me to make this either a reality or make it into a computer game that we could then put up on Steam. And like I just said, if you agree with me, please let me know in the comments below. And that was my top 10 list of metagames that I really wish would come into the real world exactly as they were portrayed in their franchise. I don't really think it would be hard. In all fairness, I think it'd be pretty easy for Warner Brothers and or Nickelodeon to essentially cut a deal with Hasbro, Mattel, or Parker Brothers to essentially bring these metagames into the real world. And after going over them, I basically explained how I would make them if I was the man in charge of the project. So anyways, if you like what you just saw, let me know in the comments below. I really appreciate your input.